Beginning in 1958, William Higginbottom was largely credited for the creation of the first ever video game, Tennis for Two, simulating tennis on radar equipment, which related to his primary work during the nuclear arms race at the time. This was the first successful game to exist electronically and allowed two players to contend against each other, sparking the electronic, competitive, and sport-related aspects of esports, as well as pioneering video games in general. This initial spark for competitive gaming drove demand for more organized events in the 60s, where we see our first esports tournament, Space War. Invented by MIT programmer Steve Russell, Space War was the first successful game to reach organized tournament status, preceded by only two more unnoticed games, OXO in 1952 and Tennis for Two in 58. So aside from these other two titles, Space War on the PDP-1 operating system can be credited for the milestone of sparking early PC gaming. By the 70s, tournaments were held for players to compete for high scores, still not directly facing off in the way that we're used to today, and arcade consoles had become widely popular. The 80s then saw the creation of scoreboards with custom name inputs originating from games like Asteroids and Starfire, then evolving to nationwide leaderboards due to a couple of kids both claiming to have had the highest score on an arcade game, Twin Galaxies, though they were very far away from each other. And so people needed a way to compare their scores more easily. This then took to multiplayer games in 1988, as NetTrek released the first online multiplayer game over PC on the internet, supporting up to 16 players in a RTS, real-time strategy Star Trek game. By the 90s, it became evident that esports were now very popular and a competitive scene where companies like Nintendo and Sega could now host massive tournaments for impressive prizes. A bit further into the 90s, we start to see LAN parties, more game titles being developed for competition, and challenge in the formation of esports teams, with more publishers, developers, and third-party companies growing how we utilize and define esports to this day. With communication at its peak, information spreads fast, and now developers sell digital copies of games, making massively anticipated titles infinitely more accessible, supporting the player base at launch and throughout the game's life. Lots of these games are also free or go on sale, supported by microtransactions or special edition bundles to further boost the accessibility in the competitive scene, allowing developers to patch and update games regularly, keeping them alive for many years as they expand, improve, balance, and complexify. Often this new content and balance changes and things like that can greatly change the dynamic of a game in esports, allowing players to put a fresh spin and new tactics into a game, keeping it alive for a very long time. In conclusion, the field continues to grow, and it's very interesting to see the new ways that people have been taking esports and the massive expanse of different types of research, the technologies that are now being involved, whether it be medical, AR, VR, etc. Developments related to esports continue to grow exponentially.